Jennifer, after a lengthy 14 years, your financial approach is no longer relevant, Brian Fields stated, reclining in his chair with an arrogant grin. We need you out by tomorrow. I sat opposite him in the boardroom of Velthorn Global headquarters, my hands neatly placed on the shiny mahogany table. The Houston skyline sparkled through the expansive windows, a view I had treasured during numerous meetings throughout my time as senior financial controller. I understand, I replied calmly, maintaining eye contact. Thank you for the chance. My composed reply clearly baffled him. His brows knitted slightly as if he anticipated tears or objections. Instead, I collected my notes, adjusted my blazer, and exited with poise. I am Jennifer Mallister. At 52, I have devoted 14 years to overseeing financial controls at Velthorn Global, an international logistics firm operating in 37 nations. I've outlasted 3 CEOs, 2 recessions, and numerous reorganizations. I've established systems that saved the company millions and safeguarded it against financial discrepancies. And now, I had just been abruptly terminated by someone who had only been with the company for less than 3 months. Brian Fields joined Velthorn with much fanfare, boasting an Ivy League degree, experience at a renowned consulting firm, and promises of transformative financial management. The board was dazzled by his elaborate presentations and contemporary methods. What they failed to notice was what I spotted immediately: inconsistencies in his assertions, ambiguous references to prior successes, and a troubling readiness to manipulate accounting standards. While clearing out my desk into cardboard boxes, I recalled a meeting from 2 weeks prior with Elaine Woodward, the audit committee chair. She had summoned me to her office after hours, shut the door, and spoken in whispers. Jennifer, we've observed some unusual trends in expense reports and contract approvals from the new CFO's office, she mentioned, sliding a folder across her desk. Nothing definitive yet, but enough to warrant concern. We'd like you to investigate it discreetly. I'd already observed the irregularities myself. Substantial consulting fees to unverified companies, travel expenses that didn't correspond to known business trips, contract terms modified post-approval. I had begun documenting all of it, meticulously, organizing the evidence, as was my habit. What Brian did not realize when he dismissed me was that I was not merely an outdated financial controller. I was the architect of Velor's financial control systems. I understood every digital pathway, every approval process, and every audit trail. More importantly, I knew precisely what I needed to uncover to reveal whatever he was concealing. As I transported my boxes to my car, I felt no anger. I felt resolute. Brian Fields had just made the biggest blunder of his career. I've never been one to display grand emotions. My father, a mathematics professor, ingrained in me that logic, and evidence always triumph over drama and outbursts. This philosophy served me well throughout my life, particularly in my financial career, where precision and facts held value. My modest 2-bedroom condo welcomed me as I arrived home earlier than usual. 14 years at Velthorn had afforded me a comfortable life, albeit not extravagant. My retirement fund was robust, my mortgage nearly settled. I could have simply walked away, found another job, and left Brian Fields to whatever schemes he was concocting. But that wasn't who I was. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and settled at my dining table, spreading out the documents I had been quietly gathering for weeks. Before leaving the office, I had emailed myself key reports that would be pertinent. Nothing confidential. I was too principled for that. Just publicly accessible information that, when viewed in the right context, told a damning tale. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. Heard the news. Call me. I dialed her immediately. Jennifer, I'm stunned, she said upon answering. This was completely unexpected. Not entirely, I replied. Brian's been trying to push me out since he arrived. I just didn't foresee it happening so abruptly. The timing is suspicious given our earlier discussion, Elaine noted carefully. Have you found anything solid? Not yet, but I'm close. I've pinpointed patterns in the consulting contracts with Meridian Bay Holdings. The company exists only on paper, and I can't find evidence of actual services rendered. That's concerning, but not sufficient for the board to act. Elaine sighed. Give me 2 weeks, I said. I may no longer have direct access to the systems, but I've established relationships with people who do, and I know precisely what to search for. After our call ended, I dedicated the evening to organizing my strategy. I created a detailed timeline of Brian's actions since his arrival, noting financial activities that coincided. I listed crucial staff members who might offer insights without jeopardizing their positions. I identified external sources that could substantiate my suspicions. The following morning, instead of heading to the office as I had for 14 years, I set up at my dining table. My laptop, notepads, and financial documents sprawled across the surface. I had contacts throughout the financial industry in Houston, individuals who respected my work. It was time to call in some favors. By noon, I had spoken with 3 former colleagues now working at banks that managed Velhorn's accounts. They couldn't share specifics, but their careful hints confirmed my gut feelings. Something was off with the new financial arrangements Brian had put in place. A week into my inquiry, an unexpected visitor arrived. Thomas Wright, Velor's IT director, knocked on my door at 8:00 p.m. Unannounced, he said nervously, adjusting his glasses, but I couldn't risk communicating through company channels. I invited him in, offering coffee, which he gratefully accepted. "Things have been odd since you left," Thomas confided, lowering his voice despite being alone with me. "Brian's hired a new IT security team. They've altered access protocols to the financial systems. Even I don't have full visibility anymore." "That's unusual," I replied, keeping my tone neutral while alarm bells rang in my mind. "There's more," Thomas continued. "Yesterday, I was instructed to retrieve all emails between you and the audit committee from the past 6 months. I had to comply officially, but..." He reached into his messenger bag and handed me a flash drive. "I wanted you to know this." Was the setback I'd feared. Brian was covering his tracks, likely realizing the audit committee had concerns. His sudden decision to fire me now made perfect sense. He discovered I was probing into his activities. "Thank you for taking this risk," I told Thomas sincerely. After he departed, I connected the drive to my computer and reviewed its contents. Thomas had included not only the emails Brian sought, but also internal system logs displaying unusual access patterns. Substantial financial data transfers were occurring during odd hours, with approval shortcuts I had never authorized when designing the system. The next morning, I received another blow. My longtime assistant, Vanessa, called in tears. "Jennifer, they're saying horrible things about you," she sobbed. "Brian informed the department that you were under investigation for financial misconduct before you left. That you were terminated for cause." I felt my first genuine anger since being dismissed. Attacking my reputation crossed a line. "What exactly did he say, Vanessa?" "That you'd been manipulating vendor contracts for years, that you'd created a system with backdoors only you understood, that the company might need to restate earnings because of your methods." It was a clever tactic on Brian's part to discredit me before I could expose him, but he made a critical mistake. By publicly attacking me, he provided me with justification to defend myself publicly. "Vanessa, I need you to do something for me," I instructed. "I need the current version of the Henderson contract, the one Brian renegotiated last month." "That's above my clearance now," she whispered. "Check the archive system," I suggested. The original should have been logged before any changes were made. That afternoon, Vanessa sent me what I required. Evidence that contract terms had been significantly altered after board approval, shifting millions in fees to consulting entities with vague deliverables, entities I now strongly suspected were linked to Brian himself. I immediately forwarded the evidence to Elaine. Her response was swift. "Come to my home office tonight. Bring everything you have." Elaine's Tudor-style home was situated in one of Houston's older established neighborhoods. Her office mirrored her personality, meticulous, traditional, yet thoroughly modern where it mattered. Multiple monitors displayed financial data, while antique bookshelves lined the walls. "The board is divided on this issue," she explained, as we reviewed my evidence. "Half see Brian as the innovative force Velor needs in changing market conditions. The other half has concerns but wants concrete proof before acting against the CEO's handpicked CFO. This isn't merely about innovative versus traditional approaches," I argued, pointing to the contract discrepancies. "These changes weren't approved by the board, yet resulted in an additional $2.7 million in consulting fees. The beneficiary companies, Meridian Bay Holdings and Fellcrest Advisors, have virtually no online presence or verifiable business activities." Elaine nodded slowly. "It's suspicious, but we need to establish a direct connection to Brian." "I think I know how," I replied, pulling up the corporate registration documents I had obtained through my industry contacts. Both companies were registered 6 months ago by the same law firm, a firm that also represents Axington Partners. Brian's former employer, Elaine noted, narrowing her eyes. Exactly. And if we examine the authorized signatories... I pulled up another document highlighting a name. Patricia Fields. Any relation? His wife, I confirmed. She uses her maiden name professionally, but I found their marriage announcement from 8 years ago. Elaine leaned back in her chair, absorbing the implications. This is getting serious, Jennifer. We're discussing potential fraud, conflicts of interest, misappropriation of funds, which is why he needed me gone, I explained. As financial controller, I would inevitably question these transactions during routine audits. He knew that. But he didn't expect that we'd already asked you to investigate his activities, Elaine said, smiling for the first time in weeks. We spent the next 3 hours constructing a comprehensive case. The pattern was clear. Brian had been systematically directing Velhorn funds to companies connected to himself, disguised as legitimate consulting services. Conservative estimates put the total at nearly $4.5 million in just 3 months. As I drove home that night, I felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence was compelling, but corporate politics were convoluted. Brian had allies on the board, particularly those who had advocated for his hiring. They wouldn't abandon him easily. My phone rang at 6:00 a.m. the following morning. It was Vanessa again, speaking in an urgent whisper. Jennifer, something strange is happening. A team from an outside accounting firm arrived this morning. They're reviewing all financial records from the past 5 years, your entire tenure as controller. My stomach tightened. Brian was escalating his defense by going on the offensive, trying to find or fabricate evidence of irregularities during my leadership. Did they say who authorized the audit? I inquired. Brian claimed it was the board's directive, but what, Vanessa? I overheard him on the phone earlier. He said, they're not finding anything useful yet, but keep digging. We need something concrete before the emergency board meeting. The emergency board meeting could only imply one thing. Elaine had brought our evidence to key board members, and they were taking it seriously. Brian was scrambling to divert attention and discredit me before he lost control of the narrative. Thank you, Vanessa. Be cautious, and don't get caught assisting me. I won't, she whispered. Most of us know who the true professional is here. The next 48 hours unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Brian made his move by calling an impromptu press conference announcing a modernization of Velhorn's outdated financial systems and hinting at concerning discoveries regarding previous practices. Although he never mentioned me by name, the implication was unmistakable to anyone familiar with the company. I watched the live stream from my dining table, noting how his confidence appeared forced, his smile not genuinely reaching his eyes. He was frightened. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from former colleagues and industry contacts, many expressing outrage at the thinly veiled accusations. I responded graciously, but said little. This wasn't the moment for a public battle. Instead, I focused on fortifying our case. A former classmate now working at the Securities and Exchange Commission provided insights without violating any protocols about what would constitute definitive evidence of financial misconduct. Armed with this knowledge, I refined my approach, concentrating on documenting the money flow from Velhorn to the shell companies and ultimately to Brian. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While examining Brian's travel expenses, I discerned a pattern of weekend trips to Austin. The company had paid for luxurious hotel stays, claiming they were for potential investor meetings, but cross-referencing with Velhorn's investor relations calendar revealed no such meetings scheduled. A social media search unveiled the missing piece. Patricia Fields had opened an art gallery in Austin 3 months ago. The grand opening photos showcased Brian proudly standing beside his wife on the same weekend he claimed to be meeting investors at Velhorn's expense. More damning was what I uncovered when I delved deeper. The gallery's business filing listed its primary financial backer as Meridian Bay Holdings, the same shell company receiving consulting fees from Velhorn. I immediately sent the evidence to Elaine, who responded with a single line. Emergency board meeting moved up to tomorrow. At 9:00 a.m. that evening, I received another unexpected visitor. Gregory Patel, Velor's general counsel, stood at my door looking uneasy. May I come in, Jennifer? He asked formally. I hesitated. Gregory reported directly to the CEO and had always been politically astute. His loyalties were ambiguous. "I understand your concern," he said, noticing my hesitation. "But I'm here on official business. The board has requested your presence at tomorrow's meeting." "Why would the board want me there?" I inquired, still not inviting him in. "The audit committee has presented serious allegations. The board wants to hear directly from all parties involved." He handed me an official letter. "This is a formal invitation, not a subpoena, but I strongly recommend you attend." After he left, I called Elaine, who confirmed the invitation was genuine. "It wasn't my idea," she admitted. "Several board members insisted on hearing your perspective directly." "Brian will be there as well. He will come prepared to discredit me?" I remarked. "Then you'd better be more prepared," she replied simply. I spent the night organizing my evidence into a clear, compelling presentation. I focused on facts, avoiding accusations or emotional appeals. The numbers told the story better than any rhetoric could. As dawn broke, I mentally prepared myself for the confrontation ahead. I selected my most professional outfit, a charcoal suit that projected authority without being ostentatious. I reviewed my notes one final time. Upon arriving at Velhorn headquarters, security escorted me to the executive floor where I had spent countless hours over 14 years. The familiar faces I passed regarded me with a mix of sympathy, curiosity, and, in some cases, hope. Standing outside the boardroom doors, I took a deep breath. In a few minutes, I would confront the man who had attempted to ruin my reputation and career. But unlike Brian Fields, I had the truth on my side. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 14 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The 12 board members, Elaine at the head of the table, and Brian, who appeared years older in the week since he had fired me. "Thank you for joining us, Ms. Mallister," said Harold Thompson, the board chairman. "We find ourselves in an unusual situation that requires clarity." I nodded professionally, taking the empty seat directly across from Brian. His attempt at a confident smile wavered as our eyes met. "For those who haven't been fully briefed," Harold continued, "serious allegations have been raised concerning financial irregularities under Mr. Fields' leadership. Countering allegations have been made suggesting these claims are retaliatory on Ms. Mallister's part." Following her dismissal, Brian leaned forward. "With respect, Chairman, Ms. Mallister's presence here is inappropriate. She's no longer an employee and has shown clear animus toward—" "Ms. Mallister is here at my request," Elaine interrupted firmly. "As head of the audit committee, I commissioned her investigation before her dismissal, not after." I noticed several board members exchange surprised glances. Clearly, Brian had been controlling the narrative. "I believe it would be beneficial for Ms. Mallister to present her findings directly," Elaine suggested. Harold nodded. "Proceed, Ms. Mallister." I connected my laptop to the presentation system and began methodically laying out the evidence. I displayed the contract discrepancies, the shell companies, the money trail to the art gallery, and the fraudulent travel expenses. I presented email trails, system logs, and financial transfers. Each slide built upon the previous one, constructing an irrefutable case. In summary, I concluded 30 minutes later, approximately $4 million has been diverted from Velhorn Global to entities connected directly to Mr. Fields or his family members, disguised as legitimate business expenses. The room remained silent for several moments after I finished. Brian's face had drained of color. "These are outrageous accusations," he finally sputtered. "This is clearly a vindictive attempt to—" "Are you denying that Patricia Fields is your wife?" asked one board member. "Or that Meridian Bay Holdings funded her gallery?" asked another. "Or that you charged Veller for investor meetings that never occurred?" added a third. Brian's eyes darted around the room, seeking allies and finding none. These connections are being presented without context. There are legitimate business reasons for— "I've seen enough," Harold interrupted. "Mr. Fields, please wait outside while the board deliberates." "You can't possibly be taking her word over mine," Brian protested. "She's clearly biased and—" "Outside Mr. Fields," Harold repeated firmly. "You'll have an opportunity to respond formally through your counsel." After Brian left, Harold turned to me. "Ms. Mallister, thank you for your thorough presentation. The board would also like you to step out while we discuss next steps." I gathered my materials and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, Harold spoke again. "One more thing, Ms. Mallister. The methods you used to gather this evidence, would you characterize them as outdated? A small smile crossed my face. I prefer the term thorough, Chairman Thompson. Several board members chuckled, breaking the tension in the room. In the hallway, I saw Brian speaking urgently with Gregory Patel. When he noticed me, he broke, off mid-sentence, his face contorting with anger. "You think you've won," he hissed, "but this isn't over." "I have connections you can't imagine," I replied calmly. "Unfortunately for you, Mr. Fields, I don't rely on imagination. I rely on evidence." The board's deliberation lasted nearly 2 hours. I waited patiently in a small conference room, reviewing emails on my phone. Brian paced the hallway outside, periodically making heated phone calls. Finally, Gregory Patel appeared. "The board would like to see both of you." We returned to the boardroom, where Harold's expression revealed nothing about their decision. "After careful consideration of the evidence," he began, "the board has reached several conclusions. First, there is sufficient cause to terminate Mr. Fields' employment with Velor Global, effective immediately." Brian started to protest, but Harold held up his hand. "Second, we have notified the appropriate authorities regarding the financial irregularities uncovered. Mr. Fields, I suggest you retain legal counsel promptly." Brian's face flushed deep red. "This is a mistake you'll all regret. I have explanations for everything presented today." "Save them for the investigation?" Harold replied coldly. "Security will escort you to clear out your personal belongings." As Brian was led away, Harold turned to me. "Ms. Mallister, the board owes you an apology. Your dismissal was clearly orchestrated to conceal financial misconduct." "Thank you, Chairman," I replied professionally. "Which brings me to our third conclusion," Harold continued. "The board would like to offer you reinstatement to your position with a significant compensation adjustment to reflect both your loyalty and the apparent increase in your responsibilities." I hadn't anticipated this turn of events. I had focused on exposing Brian, not on returning to Velhorn. "Additionally," Elaine added, "we'd like to create a new position reporting directly to the Audit Committee as Chief Compliance Officer. You would have independent authority to investigate any financial concerns without interference from executives." The offer was compelling: increased authority, direct board access, and, reading between the lines, protection from any future executive who might view my methods as too rigorous. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I would like some time to consider it." Harold nodded. "Of course, but I hope you'll agree that Velhorn needs exactly the kind of financial leadership you've demonstrated. Thorough, ethical, and apparently impossible to intimidate." 3 weeks later, I walked back into Velhorn Global as the newly appointed Chief Compliance Officer. My first task was to conduct a comprehensive review of all financial activities during Brian's brief tenure. The damage was extensive but contained. Brian had acted quickly but had not yet implemented his larger schemes. Most of the diverted funds were recoverable through legal action against his shell companies. The press covered Brian's indictment with predictable sensationalism. "CFO's modern methods included modern crimes," read one headline. Another proclaimed, "Velhorn, compliance officer uncovers multi-million-dollar fraud." I maintained a low profile, focusing on reinforcing the company's financial controls rather than seeking publicity. My team expanded to include forensic accountants and compliance specialists who shared my commitment to transparency and accuracy. 6 months later, I received notification that Brian had accepted a plea deal, admitting to wire fraud and embezzlement. He would serve 4 years in federal prison and forfeit all assets connected to the stolen funds. Patricia's gallery was seized and liquidated as part of the settlement. The day the news broke, Elaine stopped by my office. "Feeling vindicated?" she asked. "I never needed vindication," I replied honestly. "I just needed the truth to emerge," she smiled knowingly. "Well, the board is certainly pleased. Your new compliance framework has already prevented 2 significant control issues that could have caused problems down the line." "Just doing my job," I said. "Your outdated job," she teased. I finally allowed myself a genuine laugh. I've come to appreciate that label. Outdated methods like cross-verification, documentation, and actually understanding where money goes are apparently radical concepts in some circles. "Here's to being outdated," Elaine said, raising an imaginary toast. "I prefer classic," I replied with a smile. "Like fine wine and proper accounting." Looking back on the ordeal now, I realized that Brian's greatest mistake wasn't his fraudulent schemes or even targeting me specifically. It was failing to understand that in finance, integrity never goes out of style. The methods he dismissed as outdated were precisely what brought him down. As I built Velhorn's new compliance department, I often reflected on how sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about getting even, it's about proving your value.